Are you truly incapable of shame? Is there literally nothing that can shame you? Is there no act of barbarism against civilians, no execution of a child that gets under your skin, that just creeps you out a little bit?
Then U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, condemning the Syrian regime, Russia, and Iran for the humanitarian crisis in Aleppo, Syria. Thousands of civilians remain trapped there as the regime's forces used barrel bombs in an effort to retake the city from the opposition. Thousands, including hundreds of children, were killed in Aleppo over the course of the years-long war. Ambassador Power was an outspoken human rights activist long before becoming the youngest ever U.S. permanent representative to the UN in 2013. She writes, Mexico's ambassador told her she needed to decide whether she was a diplomat or an activist, but Ambassador Power says she rejected the idea, saying she could be both. As she details in her new memoir, The Education of an Idealist, Ambassador Power's path didn't lead directly to being an activist, a government insider, or a UN ambassador. Rather, she wanted to be a sports journalist. Her path began to turn, though, on June 3rd, 1989.
I was taking notes faithfully on a Atlanta Braves, San Francisco Giants game in the hopes of cutting the evening sports highlights. And yes, the footage from Tiananmen Square of the crackdown where students my age were getting mowed over by tanks. Subsequently, a man elegantly, with great dignity, stood up in front of a tank with his shopping bags and basically dared the Chinese military to run him over. I did not have, a life-changing epiphany in that moment, insofar as I did not say, I'm going to stop these great injustices in the world, and I'm going to be the one who eventually is at the United Nations standing up for human rights on behalf of the United States. I mean, my realization was much more modest. It was, wow, there's a lot going on in the world. I don't know enough. I'm spending a lot of time reading the sports pages and not very much reading the news section or history books. And so I just became a more serious student and tried to dig into current events. And that then, over time, set me on a path where then I began to ask, okay, well, within the realm of current events, now I'm not so intimidated. What internship can I have, or who can I pour coffee for? And bit by bit, as you get into that world, like anything, you then begin to believe that maybe there's something you can do at the margins.
And after graduating, you went to be a freelance war correspondent during the Bosnian War. What was it about preventing atrocities and genocide that really struck to your core and made you decide, hey, you know what, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life?
The gravity and the depth of the depravity behind what had happened sometimes you have to leave in order for it to really hit you, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And so again, my first effort at activism was faithfully photocopying this article and passing it around. I don't even know what I expected people to do, but I felt, again, what's the bare minimum one can do? Try to raise awareness, try to engage people in discussion, and bit by bit, then from there, I began to try to think, okay, if we said never again and that happened, and we said never again in Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda happened, where nearly 1 million people were killed, what has never again in fact meant? And so that then led me on a journey that took me about 5 years, to dig into that question of how has America responded to genocide? Why don't we seem to notice how we've responded, or how restrained we've been, or how the issue of genocide doesn't really seem to rise in the government and command attention? And that I turned into a book. And then, lo and behold, one of the readers of the book was Barack Obama, a newly elected senator from Illinois. And when Obama read the book, he engaged me, not on the narrow question exactly of mass atrocities, but on the question of, okay, we've just invaded Iraq, and that's gone terribly, and we, the US government, haven't taken into account what the effects of invading are going to be on the Iraqis or on our own soldiers. Then we have Rwanda and Bosnia, these other cases. What lessons can we draw in terms of sins of commission and omission, in terms of how we can do business differently? And that's what drew me to him. And then ultimately, it was serendipity in many ways that led me to be in a position at some point to actually be in the government, to be trying to make these decisions myself.